we tend to try and manage ourselves and what people think of ourselves. So impression management is the communication strategies that we use to influence how people view us. We have a public self and a private self, right? And each of us possess several selves. Some are private, some are public. We have a church self, a work self, a student self, a bar self, a sports self, a family self. Our perceived self is the person who we believe ourselves to be in moments of honest self-examination. The perceived self may not be accurate in every aspect, but it is very powerful. Our presenting self is our public image, the way we want others to appear, we want people to think of us. So each of us puts a face on, a front, and when we're around people to try and impress them. And the behavior in the back region when we're alone could be quite different. So when it's like when you go to the bar, right? So I remember being in a job first time, and I was just like doing my work kind of thing. I didn't really like the job or whatever. And we went to happy hour. And so I had a few drinks, and people were like, "Oh my God, you're not like this at work." Well, no, I'm not like this at work, because my work self is different than my happy hour self, right? The alcohol definitely makes a difference. So we strive to construct multiple identities. We want to have more than one person kind of thing, who we are. And these impression managements are collaborative kind of thing. We work with other people to make them work. And they can be either deliberate or unconscious. With our face-to-face management, there are different parts of it that help maintain these. It's our manner, our appearance, and our setting. The manner consists of the communicator's words and nonverbal actions. So doctors talk about your bedside manner, right? The doctor's bedside manner. My dad was in the hospital in Tucson getting a vein transplant. They thought they were gonna have to cut off his leg, and lo and behold, there was this famous doctor in Tucson who could do vein transplants to get the blood down to his feet. So I went down there right after he had gotten his vein transplant, where I was with my mom and my brother in the room, and my dad was kind of out of it, but a little coherent. The doctor came in and grabbed his little board, didn't even acknowledge our presence. Said, "John, how are you doing?" And if the doctor knew my dad, he'd know that he doesn't go by John, but that's okay. So my dad's kind of explaining that, there's a tingling in his foot, but it doesn't feel right, and he hasn't slept well and stuff. And the doctor's like, okay, good. And puts the clipboard back and walks away. So then his little PA or whoever comes walking in and goes, "Oh, the doctor says everything's going really well." And I was like, "No, that's not what the doctor said." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "I was here. The doctor said nothing. Didn't listen to what my father said, didn't even introduce himself, didn't say a word to my mother who's sitting here in tears. Nothing. Oh, well, everything's going well." Okay, horrible bedside manner. The second dimension of our impression management is appearance. The personal items we use to shape our image. Sometimes clothing is a really important part of creating this image. A physician's white lab coat or a policeman's officer makes a statement. Policeman's uniform makes a statement. Teachers are really bad examples of this. Teachers dress poorly. I was in charge of working with beginning teachers, and there were times where I had to go to the beginning teacher and say, "You're dressing like a kid. If something happens in here, they're not going to know who the teacher is and who the student is. You need to look more like a teacher." We had a teacher at Nellie Kaufman years ago who wore a white lab coat. Dr. Lee. Now, Dr. Lee taught English. He didn't even teach science or math, but he wore a light white lab coat. And all the kids were like, "Ooh, Dr. Lee." They thought he could do no wrong and he knew everything because he was a doctor. Well, he didn't have a doctorate. He just called himself Dr. Lee, right? But that was the impression, that was the management that he wanted to use. Tattoos are a part of this. When you have something tattooed across your forehead, whether it's a swear word, a swastika, you're making a statement right there. So my mom and dad hate tattoos, right? And I don't have any, thank goodness, right? They would disown. And they especially hate tattoos on women, because only prostitutes or evil women would have tattoos. So they were here visiting one time, and one of my good friends, Wendy, came to visit. And Wendy's from Wisconsin, we're from Michigan, so we all drink beer and eat cheese and stuff and get along really well. And she knew my parents knew her, and Wendy was on the University of Wisconsin's national championship women's basketball team. And when they won the championship in New Orleans, they all went out and got little tattoos of a basketball and their number by their ankles. So we're sitting there having drinks and cheese, and Wendy crosses her legs, and my mother gasps because she sees Wendy's ankle with a tattoo. And we all look at my mom, and my dad's like, "What's wrong? Yvonne, what's wrong?" And she's like, "Nothing." And we're like, "Okay." And my mom goes, "Jack, let's get more cheese." So they get up, and he's like, "No," but they get up, and they go in the kitchen. Okay, open concept here, right? So, kind of thing. And they don't speak softly because they both need hearing aids. And so my dad's like, "Yvonne, what's going on?" And my mom's like, "Jack, Wendy has a tattoo." And my dad's like, "No, she doesn't." And she's like, "Yes." It's like, "She's so nice." No, don't say anything, right? Okay, Wendy and I hear this whole conversation. They walk back into the kitchen with some more cheese. We're both sitting there with our mouths open. So I take the ball, I'm like, "So, Mom and Dad, you remember Wendy was on the basketball team? Oh, that's nice." Okay, never again did they invite her over. They never asked about her, anything. That's the impression they got from this. And the third way we manage it is our settings, how people view us, kind of thing, our house that we have. I have a student who's 25 years old, ex-student, and each year he gets a brand new black Cadillac Escalade. He works 3 jobs to pay for it, and his insurance and gas. And he has 1 night off each week, Friday night. And he's out. And all the girls are like, "Oh, George, he's got such a nice car." But he doesn't have time to date anybody because he's working so hard to keep this car. But that's the impression that he wants to keep. So we want to disclose ourselves. That's a very important part of this impression management. So for self-disclosure, we have to it has to contain personal information about ourselves. We must communicate this information verbally. The other person must be the target. So it has to be personally communicated to another person to be self-disclosure. Honesty goes along with this, right? To be self-disclosure, it really has to be honest stuff. There has to be some depth too, not just surface stuff. So you're just like, "Oh, I'm going to disclose something. My hair's turning gray and white." Now that's no depth, right? You guys could all know that right away. It also has to contain information that the other person isn't likely to know at the time or be able to obtain from another source. So self-disclosure the self has to be the subject, it has to be intentional, it has to be directed at another person, it's got to be honest, revealing, contain information not generally available to others, and gain much of its intimate nature from the context which is expressed. So what are some of the benefits of self-disclosure? The first is you can get things off your chest. Sometimes you do it also to clarify your own beliefs, opinions, and thoughts and attitudes with the other person, kind of talking a problem out. Sometimes you do it for self-validation, right? I think I did the right thing, didn't I? Sometimes you do it so it increases the odds that the other person is going to tell you information. Sometimes you do it for an impression formation. We reveal personal information to make ourselves more attractive. Sometimes you do it to maintain and enhance a relationship. And sometimes out of moral obligation, like if you have a sexually transmitted disease. Some risk of self-disclosure, one would be rejection. You disclose something about yourself and the person doesn't like you now. The person could have a negative impression. There could be a decrease in relational satisfaction, a loss of influence, a loss of control, or you could hurt the other person. So some guidelines for self-disclosure: is the other person important to you? If not, don't self-disclose. Is the real risk of self-disclosing reasonable? If you tell them something and they go and tell your boss and you get fired, is the self-disclosure appropriate? Too much information is not a good thing. Is it reciprocated, and will the effects be constructive?